I stared at my phone, rereading my mother's message for the 10th time. Family dinner tonight. Don't be late like always. My stomach twisted at the thought of another evening filled with subtle jabs and disapproving looks. I'm Alexandra. At 34, I own one of the city's most successful real estate ventures, not that my family knows. To them, I'm just Steven's wife, someone who does something with apartments. The irony? They all live in my building. Earth to Alex. Audrey waved a hand in front of my face, snapping me back to our lunch meeting. You're thinking about dinner, aren't you? How can I not? I sighed, pushing my salad around the plate. Mom's already starting with the texts. You know how she gets when Steven's family is involved. You could always tell them, Audrey said, raising an eyebrow. Tell them what? That you own the building. Or, better yet, everything. I forced a laugh. And give up the piece of being underestimated? No thanks. It's easier this way. Tenants don't complain as much when they don't know you're the landlord. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Hope, my sister-in-law. Mom wants to know if you're bringing anything tonight. Maybe something store-bought since we know how busy you are. I groaned and showed Audrey the message. God, the passive-aggressive emojis. Remind me again why you let them live in your building. Because I'm a masochist, I muttered. Then I sighed. Actually, it was Steven's idea. He thought it would keep everyone close. If only he knew. Over the past decade, I had quietly built an empire, starting with one small property, then another, until I owned half the residential blocks in our area. The crown jewel, the luxury apartment complex where my mother, in-laws, and Steven's sister all lived, blissfully unaware that their rent checks went straight into my company's account. Miss Whitfield? Maria, my assistant, approached our table. The contractors are ready for the walkthrough at the new development. Thanks, Maria. I'll be there in 10. As I turned back to Audrey, she grabbed my wrist. Promise me something, she said. Don't let your mom get to you tonight. Remember who you really are. I nodded, but we both knew better. My mother, Yvette, had a special talent for finding my weak spots. Nothing I did was ever quite good enough. Even marrying Steven, a successful architect, somehow fell short of her expectations. The afternoon blurred into meetings and site inspections. Before I knew it, I was standing outside my mother's apartment, my apartment technically, smoothing down my black dress. There you are. Steven appeared beside me, fresh from work. I was worried you'd get caught up at the office. I let him kiss my cheek, grateful for his constant support, even if he didn't know the full extent of my success. We had agreed to keep our finances separate, and he never questioned how my small business provided such a comfortable lifestyle. Ready? He asked, reaching for the doorbell. As I'll ever be. The door swung open to reveal my mother, perfectly coiffed as always. Finally. Everyone's been waiting. Michael and Hope brought the most wonderful wine. Michael, my brother-in-law, smirked from across the living room. Hey, Alex. Rough day at the office. You look tired. Actually, Alexandra, dear, my mother interrupted. You really should do something about those dark circles. Working too hard at your age will only lead to wrinkles. Across the room, Elisa, Mom's best friend and neighbor, hid a smirk behind her wine glass. She lived in the penthouse, my most expensive unit, and never missed a chance to witness my mother's signature brand of criticism. Steven, Mom turned to my husband with a beaming smile. Your promotion is such wonderful news. At least one of you is moving up in the world. I felt my phone vibrate in my purse, probably Audrey checking in. She knew how these dinners usually went. Ignoring it, I forced a smile and headed to the kitchen to help Hope with the dishes. Don't worry about helping, Hope called. I know you're not really the domestic type. I gripped the counter, taking deep breaths. If they only knew. If they knew I had signed a multi-million-dollar deal that morning, that the renovations they were all complaining about in the East Wing were part of my expansion plan, that every comfort they enjoyed in this overpriced apartment complex was thanks to me. But tonight wasn't the night for revelations, at least that's what I thought, until my mother's voice carried from the dining room. Everyone, please sit down. I have an announcement to make about the building management. My head snapped up. Something in her tone made my stomach drop. Maybe tonight would be more interesting than I'd planned. Heart pounding, I hurried into the dining room. Mom stood at the head of the table, wine glass in hand, commanding attention like a queen addressing her subjects. "The building management has been absolutely terrible lately," she declared. "That's why I've started a petition to have them replaced." The sip of wine went down the wrong way. I coughed violently, and Stephen patted my back. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded, still speechless as my mother continued. "I've already gathered signatures from most of the residents on our floor," she said proudly. "Elisa, you'll sign too, won't you?" Elisa nodded eagerly. "Of course. The maintenance response times have been dreadful." I bit my tongue. Those dreadful delays were due to a full electrical overhaul, an upgrade I'd ordered after discovering the previous owner had cut corners. "Alexandra," Michael chimed in, swirling his wine glass. "You work in real estate, don't you? Maybe you could actually do something useful and help with this petition." "I don't think—" "Oh, please," Mom cut in. "Alexandra barely knows anything about real estate. She just handles paperwork for that tiny management company, right, dear?" Stephen shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Actually, Dinner looks wonderful," I interrupted, not ready for Stephen to defend me. "Hope, did you make the lasagna?" "Store-bought," Hope admitted. "Some of us have actual careers and don't have time to cook from scratch." The dig wasn't subtle. Last month I had declined to join her MLM scheme, citing work commitments. She hadn't forgiven me since. "Speaking of careers," my mother continued, setting down her wine glass. "Michael just made partner at his law firm. Now that's what I call success." "Congratulations," I managed, though the word felt bitter. "Thanks, Alex." Michael's smile was razor-sharp. "If you ever want to move up from pushing papers, I could put in a word at our real estate division. Entry level, of course." The table erupted in poorly concealed snickers. Even Stephen looked uncomfortable now. "I appreciate the offer, but—" "Alexandra," my mother interrupted again. "You really should consider it. Lord knows you need some direction in your life. 34, and what do you have to show for it?" The room fell silent. I felt everyone's eyes on me. "Mom," I said quietly, "I'm doing fine." "Fine isn't good enough." She slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "Look at everyone else. Stephen's up for partner. Michael is a partner. Hope runs her own business. Even Elisa's daughter just bought her first house. But you're still playing at having a career." "That's enough," Stephen started, but Mom wasn't finished. "No, it needs to be said. I'm tired of watching my daughter waste her potential. Do you know what people say? They wonder why Stephen stays with someone so underachieving." The words hung in the air like poison. My cheeks burned, not with shame, but with rage. "Mother, let me finish," she snapped. "I've arranged an interview for you at Michael's firm, a real job, with real prospects. It's time to stop pretending to be a businesswoman." I took a slow breath, keeping my voice steady. "And the maintenance issues?" I asked. "They're because we're upgrading the electrical system. The old wiring wasn't up to code." Everyone stared at me. "And how would you know that?" Michael asked, his voice dripping with condescension. I pulled out my phone, opened my emails, and slid it across the table to my mother, because I approved the work order 3 weeks ago. She squinted at the screen. "What are you talking about?" "The petition won't do anything, Mom. The management company reports directly to the owner." I took another deep breath. "And the owner doesn't respond to threats." Hope narrowed her eyes. "And how exactly would you know what the owner thinks?" I stood slowly, a strange calm settling over me. Years of hiding, swallowing their insults, letting them believe whatever they wanted. All of it crystallized in this moment. "Because," I said, meeting each of their eyes, "you're all having dinner in my building." Silence. Stephen's fork clattered onto his plate. Michael's smug smile froze, Hope's mouth hung open, and my mother, her face flickered through disbelief, shock, then something else entirely. "You're lying," she whispered. I reached for my purse. "Would you like to see the deed?" The screech of chair legs against the hardwood floor broke the silence as my mother stood. "This isn't funny, Alexandra." "I'm not trying to be funny." My voice remained level, though my hands trembled slightly as I reached into my purse. "Stephen?" My mother turned sharply to my husband. "Did you know about this?" Stephen looked as stunned as the rest of them. Alex, what's going on? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Audrey's name flashed on the screen. Perfect timing. Excuse me, I said, stepping away from the table. Don't you dare walk away from this conversation. My mother's voice rose sharply. I answered anyway, walking toward the kitchen. Hey, Audrey. How's the dinner from hell going? Actually, I just told them. Told them what? A pause. Wait, you didn't. That I own the building? Yeah, I did. Holy, Alex, I'm coming over. No, don't. But she had already hung up. When I returned to the dining room, Michael was on his phone, likely fact-checking. Hope whispered frantically to Stephen. My mother stood rigid, her face pale. This is impossible, Michael declared, looking up. The building is owned by AW Properties. AW, I said slowly. Alexandra Whitfield. Hope's voice was barely above a whisper. That would mean that I own not just this building but the entire block, I finished, settling back into my chair. And the development across town, and the new complex on River Street. You're lying, my mother repeated, but her voice wavered. The front door burst open. Audrey strode in, a folder in hand. Sorry to interrupt family dinner, but I thought these might help. Who are you? My mother demanded. Audrey Gross, CFO of AW Properties. She dropped the folder on the table. And your daughter's business partner. Michael snatched up the documents, his lawyer instincts kicking in. As he flipped through them, his face grew increasingly pale. These are legitimate, he muttered. Property deeds, tax records, business licenses. Stephen touched my arm gently. Alex, why didn't you tell me? I wanted to, I said softly. At first, it was just easier to keep things separate, and then it became entertaining. Audrey finished, earning a glare from my mother. Entertaining? She spat. You think making fools of your family is entertaining? No, Mother, I said calmly. What's entertaining is listening to you complain about building management to my face for the past 3 years. Hope gasped. The rent increases were necessary for the improvements you all demanded, I continued. Though I did give everyone here a friends and family discount. You're welcome. This is why you wouldn't join my business opportunity, Hope realized. Hope, I gross more in a month than your MLM makes in a year. Michael let out a low whistle, still flipping through the documents. These profit margins are impressive. Thank you, Michael. Still want to offer me that entry-level position? His face reddened. Audrey snorted. I don't understand, my mother said, sinking into her chair. When did you remember Grandma's inheritance? I asked. The one you said I was foolish to invest in property instead of buying a bigger house. That was seed money, Audrey explained. Alex turned $50,000 into an empire, and she kept it quiet because certain people, she glanced pointedly around the table, might have undermined her if they'd known. Stephen suddenly stood. I need some air. Stephen, wait. I started to follow him. But Audrey caught my arm. Let him process, she whispered. This is a lot. Well, Elisa finally spoke for the first time since my revelation. I suppose this explains why my maintenance requests were always handled so quickly. Actually, I turned to her. Your requests were handled quickly because you're a good tenant who doesn't make unreasonable demands. Unlike some people, I looked meaningfully at my mother. How dare you? Her voice shook. I am your mother. Yes, you are, I said evenly. And you're also my tenant. I pulled out my phone. Speaking of which, should we discuss that petition now? The room fell into stunned silence. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, reassessing every interaction we'd had over the years. I think, Audrey said, breaking the tension, this might be a good time to tell them about the River Street development. Michael's head snapped up. What about it? I smiled. For the first time in years, I felt free. No more hiding. No more swallowing their insults. No more playing small. Well, I said, swirling my wine glass. Let's just say, the rent increases here will seem minimal compared to what's coming there. My mother's face went from pale to red. Alexandra Marie Whitfield, she hissed. You wouldn't dare. But for the first time in my life, I knew exactly how much power I held, and I wasn't afraid to use it. Wouldn't dare what, mother? I leaned forward. Raise the rent? Enforce the building's policies? Or maybe just start treating my investments like the business they are? You can't do this to your own family. Hope's voice trembled. Actually, Audrey pulled out another document. According to Section 8 of your lease agreement, we can adjust rent with 60 days' notice. Michael flipped through the lease, his expression growing tense. This is standard language, but surely... Surely what? I interrupted, standing. Surely I wouldn't enforce my legal rights. Surely I'd keep letting you all live here at below market rates while you mock my career. The door opened, and Stephen walked back in, his face composed but serious. We need to talk, Alex. My mother latched onto him like a lifeline. Surely you'll talk some sense into her. Stephen ignored her. Actually, he said quietly, I think I need to talk to my wife about why she felt she couldn't trust me with this. The words hit like a slap. Stephen, it wasn't about trust, really. He ran a hand through his hair. Because finding out my wife owns half the city during a family dinner feels like a trust issue. Oh, this is rich, my mother scoffed. She's been lying to everyone, and you're all acting like she's the victim. I never lied, I snapped. I just didn't correct your assumptions. There's a difference. A difference that cost you your family's trust, Michael said smugly. Audrey stepped forward. Okay, enough. Alex, we have that investor meeting tomorrow morning. Maybe we should... Investors? Stephen's head snapped up. What investors? I took a deep breath. We're expanding. The River Street development is just the beginning. We're acquiring the old factory district and converting it into mixed-use properties. That's a multi-million-dollar project, Michael said, his legal mind clearly running calculations. Audrey smirked. Try multi-billion. And Alex is the majority stakeholder. The room erupted. Hope started crying about family loyalty. Michael spewed legal jargon. My mother ranted about deception and manipulation. But all I could focus on was Stephen's face. When were you going to tell me? He asked softly. I was waiting for the right time. The right time? He laughed bitterly. Like when? When you own the entire city. That's not fair, I protested. No, you know what's not fair. He gestured around the room. This, all of this, making me look like an idiot in front of everyone. Did you enjoy it? Watching us fumble in the dark while you pulled the strings? Stephen, please. I need some time. He headed for the door. I'll be at Mark's place tonight. The door closed behind him with a finality that made my chest ache, but I couldn't fall apart. Not here. Well, my mother said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. I hope you're happy. You've managed to destroy your marriage along with everything else. Audrey stepped in, her voice ice cold. The only thing being destroyed here is the illusion that you could keep belittling Alex forever without consequences. How dare you speak to me that way in my home? It's not your home, I said quietly. It's my property. I pulled out my phone, opening my email. And speaking of which, I think it's time we reviewed everyone's lease terms. Hope's voice wavered. You wouldn't. Try me. I started typing. Maria, please send me the current market rates for comparable units in the area and schedule a building-wide inspection for next week. It's time we ensured all units are up to code. Alexandra, my mother's voice trembled. You're being ridiculous. No, mother, I'm being a businesswoman. Isn't that what you always wanted? Michael stood, straightening his tie. This isn't over. We'll have our lawyers review everything. Please do, Audrey said smoothly. I'm sure they'd love to go up against our legal team. Alex, Hope pleaded, think about what you're doing. I looked around at their faces, shocked, angry, betrayed. The same family that had dismissed me for years now realizing they'd been living in my shadow all along. I have thought about it, I said, standing. Every time you mocked my career, every time you dismissed my achievements, every time you made me feel small. I grabbed my purse and nodded to Audrey. Now, I'm done thinking. It's time for action. As we walked toward the door, my mother called out, You'll regret this. I turned back one last time. No, mother. I smiled. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. The door closed behind us, and for the first time that evening, I let myself breathe. The truth was finally out, but somehow this felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. 17 missed calls from my mother, 23 texts from Hope, and 1 email from Michael's law firm. They work fast, Audrey muttered, reading over my shoulder in our office, but their threats are empty. Everything's ironclad. It's not the legal threats I'm worried about. I showed her the latest text from Steven. We need to talk. Coming by the office at noon. Want me to stay? I need to handle this myself. I rub my temples. How's damage control going? Your mother's been calling every tenant in the building trying to rally support. Audrey smirked. Turns out, people aren't too keen on backing someone against their landlord. My phone buzzed again. Hope. Mom's having a breakdown. How could you do this to her? Delete, I muttered, swiping the message away. Any word from the investors? They're still in. Actually, they're more interested now that they know you're not just some silent partner. Audrey smirked. The whole secret successful woman angle is apparently very appealing. A knock at the door made us both look up. Steven stood there, looking exhausted but determined. I'll give you two some privacy, Audrey said, gathering her papers. Steven took her seat, his eyes sweeping over my office, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline. So this is where you really work, he said finally. Steven, let me explain. He held up a hand. I spent all night thinking about this, about us, about why you felt the need to hide everything. I didn't hide it because of you, I said softly. Didn't you? He leaned forward. We've been married 5 years, Alex. 5 years of me believing we were equals, partners, and all this time. We are equals, I protested. Your career is just as successful. My career? He let out a short, bitter laugh. I'm up for partner at my firm. Meanwhile, you own half the city. You're about to close a $1 billion deal. How is that equal? Money isn't everything. But trust is. He pulled out his phone. Did you know your mother sent me your company's financial records this morning, trying to prove you'd been deceiving me about our prenup? My stomach dropped. Steven, I can explain. You don't have to. He exhaled sharply. I already knew you had separate assets. I respected that. What I can't respect is the lying. I never lied. Lies of omission are still lies, Alex. His voice rose, then he caught himself. Do you know how foolish I feel? All those times I defended you to your mother, telling her you were doing well in your small business. I was the biggest joke of all. You weren't a joke, I said, reaching for his hand. He pulled away. I needed something that was mine, something they couldn't criticize or control. And what am I in all this? His voice was quiet now. Just another pawn in your game? Of course not. I love you. Do you? He stood. Because from where I'm standing, you love power more than honesty. A knock at the door interrupted us. Maria poked her head in. Miss Whitfield, your mother is in the lobby demanding to see you. Security is asking what to do. I closed my eyes briefly. Tell them to escort her out, and have legal draft a formal warning about harassment. You're having your own mother thrown out? Steven shook his head. Listen to yourself. What choice do I have? She's trying to undermine my business, my marriage. Your business, he repeated with a bitter laugh. That's all you care about, isn't it? Well, congratulations, Alex. You've won. You've proven you're better than all of us. I hope it was worth it. Steven, please. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. The word hit like a punch. Divorce? You can't be serious. Actually, I am. He turned to leave. For the first time, I see you clearly. He walked out. Through the glass walls, I watched him past the reception desk, past Audrey returning with coffee, past the AEW Properties logo I had worked so hard to build. My phone buzzed again. Hope. Mom's being escorted out by security. I hope you're happy with what you've done to this family. I started to reply, then stopped. What could I even say? That I was sorry for succeeding. Sorry for finally standing up for myself. Sorry for... Alex? Audrey stood in the doorway. The investors are here early. Should I reschedule? I straightened my spine, wiped my eyes, and stood. Number, show them in. Are you sure? After what just happened? What just happened is exactly why I built all this. I gestured to my office. So I'd never have to depend on anyone else's approval again. But as I walked toward the conference room, my mother's words echoed in my head. You'll regret this. And for the first time, I wondered if I already had. 3 days later, I sat in my office reviewing lease termination notices when Michael strolled in unannounced. Your security team needs work, he said, dropping into the chair across from me. I just told them I was your lawyer. You're not my lawyer, I replied, not looking up. And impersonating one is a crime. Speaking of crimes, he pulled out a folder. I've been doing some digging. Of course you have. I kept typing. How's Mom? Having a nervous breakdown thanks to you. And Hope. Staying with her. He clenched his jaw. In my apartment. I finally met his gaze. About that. I turned my screen toward him. These lease terminations. Completely legal. Your rent is going up to market rate in 60 days. You can either pay it or move out. This is revenge. Plain and simple. Number. This is business. I tapped the screen, showing him the financial reports. I've been subsidizing your lifestyles for years. That charity ends now. Michael scoffed. And Steven? Ruining your marriage? That's business too? My fingers froze over the keyboard. That's none of your concern. Actually, it is, Michael said. Because while you've been playing real estate mogul, you've destroyed every relationship you had. Was it worth it? Are you here for a reason, Michael? Besides amateur psychology. He leaned forward. I have a proposal. Not interested. Hear me out. He opened a folder. You're planning to develop the old factory district, but there's a problem with the zoning laws your team missed. I raised an eyebrow. And? I can help navigate it in exchange for some considerations. You mean blackmail. I mean family taking care of family. He smiled thinly. Keep our rents where they are. Back off this revenge campaign against Mom, and I'll make sure your development goes through smoothly. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Something funny? He asked. Actually, yes. I pulled out my own folder. I knew you'd try something like this, so I had my actual lawyers look into your firm's history with the zoning board. His smile faltered. Interesting reading, I continued. All those private meetings, those convenient rezoning approvals. I wonder what the ethics board would think. You're bluffing. Try me. I stood up. Now, about those lease terminations. My office door burst open. Hope stormed in, her face streaked with tears. You heartless. Hope, Michael started. No. She slammed her hands on my desk. She needs to hear this. Her voice trembled. Mom's in the hospital. Anxiety attack. Are you happy now? A flicker of concern hit me, quickly suppressed. That's unfortunate, but nothing, she shouted. You did this. You and your stupid revenge plot. Revenge? I laughed again, but it sounded hollow. I'm just running my business. Your business? Hope's voice rose. What about your family? What about Steven? Steven made his choice. Number, you made it for him when you decided money and power mattered more than love. My phone buzzed. A message from Audrey. Steven's lawyer just delivered the divorce papers. Want me to handle it? I swallowed hard. Get out. Hope blinked. What? Both of you. Get out of my office. You can't be serious. You have 60 days to find new apartments. If you can't afford market rate, I suggest you start looking now. Michael stood slowly. You'll regret this, Alex. When you're alone, with nothing but your money. I said get out. I pressed the security button under my desk. And next time you impersonate my lawyer, I will report you to the Bar Association. 2 security guards appeared instantly. Hope let them lead her out, still crying. Michael followed more slowly, pausing at the door. You know what's sad? He said. You've become exactly what you always hated about Mom. Cold. Controlling. alone. After they left, Audrey walked in, holding coffee, her expression concerned. I heard shouting, "You okay?" "Fine." I stared at the divorce papers on my desk. "Have legal review these," I said, "and schedule an inspection of Mom's unit for tomorrow." Audrey hesitated, then sat across from me. "Alex, maybe we should take a step back. Consider what? Whether you're letting this revenge thing go too far." I picked up the lease termination notices, my hands shaking slightly. "It's not revenge," I said. "It's consequences." "Is it?" Audrey's voice was gentle. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like you're burning every bridge you've ever built." My phone buzzed again. "Steven, sign the papers. Hope you find what you're looking for." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything I'd gained and lost in the past week. "The investors loved your presentation," Audrey said softly. "The Factory District project is going to make you one of the most powerful developers in the city." "Yeah." I stared at Steven's message. "But at what cost?" A week later, I stood in my mother's empty apartment, surrounded by echoes of family dinners and old arguments. She'd been discharged from the hospital yesterday and moved in with Hope, leaving behind 30 years of memories and a hastily scrawled note. "I hope you're satisfied." Audrey flipped through her tablet. The inspection team found code violations, unauthorized electrical work, illegal bathroom renovations. She sighed. She always thought rules didn't apply to her. I ran my fingers along the dining table, the same spot where everything had fallen apart. "Alex." A familiar voice from the doorway. I turned. "Steven?" Audrey gave me a quick squeeze on the arm. "I'll give you 2 minutes." She slipped out. Steven looked different, tired. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up. He only did that when he was stressed. "Your lawyer said you haven't signed the papers," he said. "Been busy." I gestured around the empty apartment. "Family drama, you know. I heard about your mom, the hospital. Did you also hear about the illegal renovations, the attempted blackmail, the—" "Stop." He held up a hand. "Just stop." I swallowed hard. "This isn't you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Isn't it? Everyone seems pretty convinced I'm turning into my mother." "No." He stepped closer. "Your mother never built anything. She just tore things down." His voice softened. "You used to build things up." "Used to," Steven said, "before this revenge campaign took over your life." He picked up the note from the table. "Was it worth it? Winning?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Hope's name flashed on the screen. "Aren't you going to answer?" Steven asked. I did, putting it on speaker. "Hello? Mom's getting worse." Hope's voice cracked. "The doctors say it's severe anxiety and depression. She keeps saying she has nothing left to live for." "That's manipulative, even for her." "God, listen to yourself," Hope shouted. "Your own mother is falling apart and you're acting like this is just a business deal gone wrong." "What do you want from me, Hope?" "I want my sister-in-law back. The one who helped me move into my first apartment. The one who supported me when I lost my job. Not this. Not some monster who cares more about power than people." Steven watched me, his expression unreadable. "I'm not a monster," I said quietly. "I'm just what?" Hope's voice broke. "Successful? Powerful? Alone?" Silence. "Congratulations," she said bitterly. "You won. Mom's broken. Michael's firm is investigating him for ethics violations. And Steven is leaving you. I hope your empire was worth it." The line went dead. "She's right, you know," Steven said softly. "This isn't about business anymore. It's about punishment." "They deserved it," I whispered. But even I could hear the doubt in my voice. "Did they?" He met my eyes. "Did I?" He moved closer. "The Alex I married wanted success to prove something to herself, not to destroy people. I didn't destroy." "Really?" He pulled out his phone, scrolling through social media posts. My mother looking frail in a hospital bed. Hope's tearful updates about family betrayal. Michael's cryptic posts about loyalty and loss. "They're playing the victims," I protested. "No," Steven said. "They're being human. something you seem to have forgotten how to be. My phone buzzed again. Audrey. Investors want to meet. Concerns over negative publicity. Perfect. I let out a bitter laugh. Even the empire is starting to crumble. Good, Stephen said. I frowned. Good? Yes, because maybe now you'll remember what really matters. What's that supposed to mean? It means, he said, I didn't fall in love with AW Properties. I fell in love with Alexandra, the woman who wanted to build something meaningful, not tear everything down out of spite. I sank into a dining room chair, the same chair I had sat in during that fateful dinner. I don't know how to fix this. Yes, you do. He sat across from me. You're a builder, Alex. You've always been good at fixing broken things. His voice was quiet but firm. The question is, do you want to fix this, or do you want to keep breaking it? My phone buzzed again. A message from Hope. Mom's asking for you. Stephen stood. The divorce papers are still on your desk, he said. But so is the key to fixing all of this. He walked to the door, then paused. You know what the difference is between you and your mother? I looked up. She tears things down because she's afraid of being small. He held my gaze. You build things up because you know how big you really are. At least, you used to. He left. I sat in the empty apartment, surrounded by the consequences of my choices. The empire I had built suddenly felt as hollow as the rooms around me. My phone lit up again. A photo from Hope, my mother, small and fragile in her hospital bed, clutching an old family photo of us. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something crack inside me. Maybe it was time to build something new, something better. The hospital corridor felt endless as I walked toward my mother's room, clutching a folder of papers. Hope sat outside, eyes widening when she saw me. What are you doing here? Fixing things. I held up the folder. New lease agreements, original rates, guaranteed for 5 years. She stared at me. Is this another game? No games. I took a deep breath. Just a daughter who needs to talk to her mother. Hope stood slowly. She's awake, but if you upset her, I won't. I stepped inside. My mother looked small in the hospital bed, nothing like the woman who had once commanded family dinners. She didn't even look up. Mom, come to evict me from the hospital too. Her voice was weak, but the bite was still there. Actually, I said, sitting beside her, I came to show you something. I pulled out my phone, opening a photo album. Remember this? She glanced over. It was a picture of me at 12, proudly standing in front of a treehouse I had built. You said it would fall apart, I continued. But it didn't, because even then, I knew how to build things that last. She didn't reply. Mom, I said carefully, you were right about one thing. Her eyes flickered toward me. I did become like you. I swiped to another photo, my first property. I got so focused on proving myself that I forgot what I was trying to prove. She exhaled shakily. That you're better than me? No. I met her eyes. That I'm different from you. I pulled out the folder. These are new lease agreements. For everyone. Same rates as before. She finally looked at me. Really looked at me. Why? Because winning doesn't feel like winning anymore. I placed the folder on her bed. I don't want an empire built on revenge. That's not who I am. She studied me. And who are you? Someone who builds instead of destroys. I pulled out one last document and handed it to her. Her hands trembled as she took it. Blueprints? She murmured. For the factory district development, I explained. Senior living apartments, with a community center named after you. She blinked. I don't understand. I'm tired of fighting, Mom. Tired of proving points. I want to build something meaningful. The door opened. Stephen stood there, surprise flickering across his face. Sorry, he said. I didn't know. Stay, I said quickly. Please. He hesitated, then stepped inside. My mother looked between us. The divorce papers, she said softly. Did you sign them? No. I pulled them from my bag, torn in half. Because Stephen was right, I continued. I'm a builder, not a destroyer. Alex, Stephen started. I know it won't fix everything, I said. but I want to try. I want to rebuild what matters. My mother touched the blueprints again. Why name it after me? Because despite everything, I said, you taught me my most valuable lesson, the difference between power and strength. She frowned slightly. Power tears things down, I explained. Strength builds them up. The door opened again. Hope appeared. Michael just behind her. Is this real? Michael asked, holding up the lease agreements. No tricks? No tricks. I stood. I'm offering a fresh start for all of us. Just like that? Hope's voice was skeptical. Number not just like that. I met her eyes. We need rules, boundaries, real relationships, not power plays. I glanced at my mother. Starting with honest conversations. She swallowed hard. I don't know how. Neither do I admitted. But I do know how to build things. Maybe we start there. Stephen moved closer, reaching for my hand. Together, he asked. I squeezed his hand. Together. Then I looked at the room, the family I'd nearly lost. I'm not giving up my success. I worked too hard for it, but I want it to mean something more than revenge. My mother nodded slowly. The community center. She hesitated. Could I help with the planning? I smiled. I'd like that. You always did have an eye for design. Hope wiped her eyes. What about family dinners? New tradition, I suggested. Everyone cooks. Everyone contributes. No more power plays. And the building? Michael asked. It stays under my management, but with open communication, proper channels for complaints, mutual respect. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, my mother reached for my hand, and for the first time, she looked at me without judgment. You really did build something amazing, she said softly. I'm still building, I replied, and this time, I wanted to build it right. Stephen wrapped an arm around me. That's the Alex I married. Looking around the room, at Stephen's proud smile, Hope's cautious optimism, Michael's thoughtful expression, and my mother's tearful acceptance, I realized something. Success wasn't about proving people wrong, it was about proving to yourself that you could be right. So, I said, pulling out my phone, who wants to see the preliminary designs for the community center? As my family gathered around, offering ideas, actually listening to each other, I felt something shift. This wasn't an ending. It wasn't even really a new beginning. It was simply the next floor in something I'd been building all along, a legacy of strength, not power. And this time, I was building it with the right blueprints. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that power and success mean nothing if you have no one to share them with. I spent years proving my worth, fighting to be taken seriously, and in the end, I nearly lost everything that mattered. Success isn't just about winning. It's about building something that lasts, something meaningful. Real strength isn't in control or revenge. It's in knowing when to stand your ground and when to let go of the fight. If you ever find yourself sacrificing relationships just to prove a point, ask yourself, what are you really trying to win? Because sometimes, the greatest victory isn't in proving others wrong. It's in proving to yourself that you can choose growth over resentment. Build wisely. And remember, life isn't just about the empire you create. It's about who stands beside you when it's done. Good luck, and thank you for listening to my story.